Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
Namaste and welcome to this day 5 of the Indic MegaWeek in Jaipur Dialogues. And today I have got Lieutenant General Ata Hasnain with me. Namaste, Hasnain Saab. How are you?
Namaste.
Oh, wonderful having you here again. And we are having this Indic MegaWeek where we're discussing 3 important events, one of which is having its centenary, the non-cooperation movement under the Khilafat Committee, which the Congress later joined, and which we have learned as a non-cooperation movement by the Congress. So I'm trying to disabuse people a little bit over there. The second one, of course, is the anniversary of the Article 370 nullification, and that is what we are going to discuss. And the third one is, of course, is the Ram Temple Shilanyas. So 3 seminal events within the first week. So we decided to observe this as the Indic Mega Week. And today is day 5. You are going to be on air on day 5. So, sir, let's talk about the Article 370. And like the military man you are, we come down straight to the brass tacks. What's the military perspective?
I'm glad that you start by asking the military perspective, because most people start by asking the economic, social, development aspects, domains, because that is where the expectations were very high from the action of the abrogation of Articles 370, 35A, and the restructuring of the administration of Jammu and Kashmir. So let me come into the military aspects straight away. See, as I have always been claiming, the army, security forces along with them, rest of the security forces, had managed to always, in the last 30 years or so, always managed to correct the situation, stabilize the situation in what I call conflict stabilization. And we were always waiting for the next step, which was always in the hands of either the political leaders or maybe in the hands of the bureaucrats. But that step would never come, because it's not just the military domain which can defeat proxy war from Pakistan. And therefore, this particular decision on the 5th of August 2019 came as a breath of fresh air, because it was actually a political decision, and it was actually a political intervention to support what the military had been doing for the last 30 years. And I substantiate this further by saying that it's not just the decision on the 5th of August which has made a difference. It is the realization by the government of India, perhaps 3 years ago or maybe 4 years ago, 2016, that this game could not go on in the manner that it was going on. And that sooner than later, Pakistan would bounce back in a very big way. There was a new terrorist leadership, a young leadership which had emerged, a separatist leadership which had emerged in Kashmir. There was tremendous support coming from Pakistan, and India's efforts to find peace with Pakistan had all been spurred. And therefore, it was necessary to go after the terrorists and to go after this system, what is called the ecosystem of Kashmir. And that started in 2017 along with Operation All Out, and is going on even till today. By 2019, when the decision was finally taken, I would say the campaign had run through perhaps not even 1/3 of its effectiveness. And therefore, this game will continue. We have managed to stabilize the situation today. A lot of people will contest and say 150 terrorists killed in Kashmir, and you say you have stabilized the situation. I would put it this way, it's a question of interpretation. 150 terrorists have been killed. Only 26 terrorists have infiltrated from POK this year, probably one of the lowest figures in many years. 40% reduction in the overall recruitment of local terrorists, which means that the availability of the replacements of 150 killed are also going to be very, very limited. Therefore, and of course, much better intelligence which is flowing. Therefore, although there's an encounter a day, it's not a negative encounter in the manner it was happening in 2016 and 17 sometimes. It's all a positive encounter for us, for India, where we are eliminating terrorists, and overall we have lost far few soldiers and other security personnel this year.
Absolutely right. So I think when you analyze how the military is going to deal with the border situation, especially in the eastern sector, because the Ladakh has also been affected by this abrogation of, nullification of Article 370. There has been a lot of criticism. I was there yesterday on a chat, and we had a defense expert there, and they sounded, rather pessimistic about this, and they thought that 370 was probably a big thing, but probably not such a big thing. Whereas I have always held, in fact, now I've written 3 books, and in all the 3 books, there's one thing which I've said again and again, that you cannot win a war without winning the narrative. So you think if you take the overall situation also in the eastern sector, the Ladakh situation, as well as here, winning the narrative and cutting off that umbilical cord of that, that always that little aspiration, that seed of aspiration that was being lit in the hearts of ordinary Kashmiri. Okay, look, you are Pakistani basically, and that is why you are separate, that you are special. That is why the government of India has been compelled to give you this special status. And this is because you belong to Pakistan, you are Muslim, you are, we are still the torchbearers of the two-nation theory. You are an equal and separate nation within India. So that sort of narrative, if that had continued, as you said, that the military destroyed the ecosystem of the terrorism time and again, handed it over. But then that narrative being there, that narrative won it back for them again and again. So how does this narrative situation work? And why do people, especially some defensive specialists who are very pessimistic about the situation because the things have not quite panned out as they had expected? Not in the military realm. I mean, these are defense experts, but they're not, again, as you said, they're not talking about military realm. They're talking about economic, social, political, developmental, and what have you. So please,
Very
link
well,
up
very
this
well, very well
narrative
put.
with the.
I'll answer this to the best of my capability, and it's a brilliant question. First of all, Kashmir, as you are aware, is a very, very complex issue. And Article 370, 35A had given an exclusivity to the Kashmiris, there's no doubt, within the Indian Constitution. It had actually caused more confusion in the psyche of the Kashmiri mind as to which side are they really on. They didn't claim to be fully Indian, because when you went there, they said, "Aap Hindustan se aaye ho." And they also were not Pakistani. They wanted to be Azad, and that Azadi they knew very well was virtually impossible considering the geostrategic location of Jammu and Kashmir. So this was causing a tremendous amount of confusion in the minds of even the intellectual elements of society there, and the people are very, very well read, well educated, very developed media. Despite all this, there was utter confusion in their minds. And I think Article 370, the abrogation of 370 and 35 actually is the initiation of setting right the thinking process of the Kashmiri mind. Because over a generation, maybe 2 generations, this will get corrected. If you go to social media today, you will see there are lots of positive signals emerging, and a lot of young Kashmiris are coming on board and writing and speaking. Equal number of negativity is there. There's no doubt. I am abused every day. I'm trolled every day there by a lot of people. But nevertheless, there is also a lot of positivity coming out. And that is why I tell a lot of defense analysts, strategic analysts, that you have no business to be passing judgment in 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months of an event which is to be considered almost a transformational event in the history of India. So hold your horses. There are many years in which you will have these anniversaries, and you will keep assessing this. But to come to one other specific aspect of your question, which is very important, and that is the linkage with what is happening in Ladakh, there is no doubt that the decision to abrogate this and the 2 constitutional provisions and the administrative decision perhaps gave a perception to the world and to many countries who are observing us very closely that this had given a boost to the strategic confidence of India, to the strategic confidence of the Indian leadership. And that, to their perception and their security thoughts, is a very dangerous thing. Because there were now thoughts about the reintegration of Gilgit-Baltistan into India. There was thought of even looking at the larger picture of the whole of Jammu and Kashmir as per the resolution of 1994. And that was not being taken very positively by the powers like China and Pakistan. The China-Pakistan economic corridor, particularly, which joins these two nations, and in which a lot of money has been invested, in which China considers probably its flagship of the Belt and Road Initiative. China would not want to see it endangered, and Pakistan was beginning to perceive that something is going to happen as of tomorrow. And that is one of the contributing factors, not the only contributing factor, one of the contributing factors which led to the current Chinese show of aggressiveness on the line of actual control, which has come up to a point and gone behind. It is at the moment in a state of, it's in a hung state where perhaps till winter, maybe even till more, there will be a little bit of coercion here and there. All this is happening to send messages to India and dilute our strategic confidence. We should not feel perturbed by this. We have the capability to hold on and detach Jammu and Kashmir from this issue and continue pursuing the narratives that we are playing on, that the whole of Jammu and Kashmir belongs to India.
Quite right. That was definitely one of the contributing factors to the Ladakh standoff. And as of now, it appears to be in a hung state, as you say. It is a stalemate. And even if it continues for a year or till the next summer, I quite agree with you that we should not feel perturbed. Now, there's another question that comes to the fore, that when this Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act was being considered, there was, I think, a very large section of people who wanted a trifurcation instead of a bifurcation. And because it's only a bifurcation, and Jammu and Kashmir, they remain stitched together even today, there seems to be a sense of disappointment in Jammu, and there also seems to be a sense of disappointment among the Kashmiri Pandits. Whereas when we look at the positive side of it, I think a lot of people who are actually deprived, they have got their domicile back, and a lot of these menial classes, the scheduled castes, the Gurkhas, the women, the West Pakistan refugees, all these people who had been marginalized and been languishing on the sidelines in spite of being actual residents of that area for 70, 80 years. They have got their due, but there still seems to be a lingering sense of disappointment among two major sections or two major stakeholders, the Jammuites and the Kashmiri Pandits.
That's again a very, very pertinent observation. And I am, for one of those who actually on the first day itself complimented the government of India for having kept Jammu and Kashmir together as a union territory and not trifurcated J&K and not created Ladakh, Jammu and Kashmir as three union territories. I'll tell you the reasons why I felt that right at the beginning. It was almost a spontaneous reaction. You see, all that you spoke about the empowerment and the granting of domicile to all these elements who had been disempowered could very well have happened even if it was trifurcated. Jammu, most of these people existed in Jammu, and in Jammu, becoming a union territory by itself they would have all been empowered. What the Jammuites are feeling extremely disappointed upon, and they're justified. They're justified. It is a sentiment which is being expressed for short-term gains. They expected that they will have self-government completely in the sense of Jammu province, a Jammu union territory, in which will have its own budget. They will no longer be beholden to the Kashmiri majority within the state, and no one will dictate the budgets on them. In the assembly, there's no requirement for the Jammuites to be appealing for things in the assembly. And the perception which has prevailed in Jammu all these years that they got the wrong end of the stick as far as development, budget and overall development was concerned. There's no doubt all of them are seeking a better tomorrow through this. But I want to reassure, and I love speaking to people from Jammu. I've been to Jammu so many times. I love meeting them, meeting their emotions and their sentiments. I always like to explain to them the long-term perspective. And that is that actually between Jammu and Kashmir exists a special link. This has always been there. And there are business links, so many other historical links which exist there. If you just sever them completely, then Kashmir by itself will become far more dangerous within the Indian Union, because you will find an awkward Muslim majority union territory with kinds of sentiments which will be expressed and open to interference and meddling by Pakistan and things like that. That will continue there, which is what we are seeking to actually neutralize completely. It is the Jammu route, the presence of Jammu with Kashmir, that acts as a balancing factor and actually promotes the prosperity of both. Because there's tremendous amount of business in Kashmir, there's a tremendous amount of business in Jammu. The entire winter management of Kashmir is done by people in Jammu. A lot of management of Jammu is done by people in Kashmir. A lot of these things are coming out from there. After all, a lot of produce comes out from there, which looks after the people in Jammu. So the two Vyapar mandals of the two regions do tremendous amount of work with each other. I would say the two communities of Kashmiri and Jammuites have just looked in the opposite directions for a very long time. You need to work to try and bring them together. And one of the major obstacles to this is obviously the fact that the Kashmiri Pandits suffered so heavily. Virtual genocide which happened on the 19th of January 1990 and a little beyond, that has acted as a sentiment, and genuinely so, which is preventing any positivity between the two sides. We have to get rid of that. I don't foresee this happening very easily, because the Kashmiri Pandits are very, very angry people, and there's no doubt they're justified to be angry. They've lost their dear ones, they've lost their property, they've lost their livelihoods completely. So to that end, this entire game is a long-term game which has to be played out with a lot of patience. And the government of India has to recognize this. Otherwise, if you don't, we are only going to take 2 steps forward and maybe 3 steps back.
Good that you mentioned that. But my point also in this is that while we keep hoping that the Kashmiri Pandits actually get back to their original homeland, the ground situation is that the substratum is completely occupied by the radical forces, chiefly the Jammu and Kashmir Jamaat-e-Islami. The JEI-JK has been a very potent force right since the 1950s, and we know that the slow creeping radicalization and what is called the sixth exodus, the creeping exodus that happened between the 1950s and 1980s, that happened because of the influence of these radical elements, the Jamaat-e-Islami Jammu and Kashmir, which is not a part of Jamaat-e-Islami Hind, but which is a part of, not exactly a part of, which was an adjunct of Jamaat-e-Islami Pakistan of Abul Ala Maududi. Because Abul Ala Maududi's original Jamaat-e-Islami Hind actually shifted to Pakistan, and Jamaat-e-Islami Hind, which exists today in India, is a different entity altogether. So that being the case, and the political correctness that prevails and that prevents people from speaking the truth to, they say, speaking truth to power. The power on the ground in Kashmir Valley belongs to these radical elements of Jamaat-e-Islami, J&K. And nobody seems to be, at least I haven't heard. I mean, I know the Lieutenant Governor personally. I did, well, it's not fair to talk about it here. But I have been warning everyone that no amount of goodwill or superficial goodwill or goodwill on the surface is going to work unless you look at this problem, you look at these radical elements, you look at these mosques, you look at these Devbandis who have come and infiltrated all these mosques. And please, for God's sake, do not parade this Sufi, peaceful Sufi kind of a thing, because the peaceful Sufi was the one who headed the partition movement. All the Barelvis were there in the forefront. We know that, all these people. So how do we address these problems? Unless these problems are addressed, we cannot hope to have a situation in which the Kashmiri Pandits can actually go back to their homes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad you have a very good understanding of this aspect of the situation there. There are not too many people who are well versed with the ground situation as far as the social side is concerned. Everyone thinks that fighting militancy and fighting terror is a question of just killing terrorists, eliminating them, and counting the numbers at the end of the year. Which is why I say that you have to have a long-term perspective of this, and you've got to have a deep perspective of what happened here before. No doubt, Jamaat-e-Islami Kashmir is already banned, as you are aware. Has nothing to do with Jamaat-e-Islami India. Jamaat-e-Islami India is still very much a democratized entity, which is, I would even call it nationalistic entity, but very, very different to what the Jamaat-e-Islami Pakistan is. And no doubt JEI Kashmir is a twin of the JEI Pakistan. That's why it's under ban of them. The Jamaati influence in Kashmir has been there, and it was part of the Zia plan, as we are all aware, that to use the Jamaati influence and the Jamaati networks to permeate into Kashmiri society, to make sure that an element of radicalism comes in there, the Wahhabi culture develops there to counter the complete Sufi aspect, negative during the partition, no doubt, but the overall Sufi theology, if you see, is not a negative theology against India in any way, that way. But the attempt by Pakistan was to convert it to such and create a situation, a groundswell in Kashmir, which would be completely radical. And it all happened under the noses of most of the people like me who were commanders there, bureaucrats, leaders, politicians, everyone who visited Kashmir. Why? Why? Because people had no understanding of what you were saying. Even today, people have very, very little understanding of the historical aspect of Islam in Kashmir. But efforts are going on today, and you'll be happy to know that there are people who are today understood this quite well for the last couple of years, and an effort to try and comprehend it correctly has been done, and people are struggling with the whole issue of counter-radicalization, the de-radicalization efforts, in which they are succeeding to an extent. But where we are definitely succeeding is the networks which also act as an adjunct and support this entire thing. These networks are in the domain of the media, in the domain of bureaucracy, judiciary, in the bar council, financial circuits, the drug circuits, arms and ammunition circuits. I mean, you name it, there are networks of overground workers all over Kashmir. You see, to take this out, to just surgically remove the aspect of radicalism from all this is impossible. All these networks have to be utilized. And that is why I say this game only began in 2017 or so. The realization only came around in 2016-17. So we are just at the beginning stages of what needs to be done. And that is why I'm in whatever I'm writing and putting out at the moment, I'm trying to advise people essentially that be patient. This understanding which should have dawned in the 60s or 50s or 60s has dawned now, 60 years later. And therefore, you have to be patient. Hopefully, leaderships at different levels will understand this fully. And also be patient, because this kind of a countering of this cannot just be ham-handed. It has to be done very, very, very scientifically, very strategically. And there's no harm in actually learning about this from other nations around the world. A country like Egypt, for example. A country like Egypt, which the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt attempted to do exactly this. But the Egyptian secular system of that time, President Nasser, President Sadat, all of them essentially went after this. Because they knew that if it went into the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood, there would be no future for Egypt at all. That is exactly we need to study some of the approaches which countries like Egypt, even other countries in the Middle East have actually followed.
You mentioned this, that we need to study their approaches. I think that's a very good point you made. I did try and study their approaches, and I recall one statement made by the foreign minister of the UAE. I forget his name right now. He was attending a conference in Riyadh, and some Europeans asked him a question about Muslim radicalization in Europe. And he said that, okay, listen to me carefully. And I'm just repeating it. He says, listen to me carefully. So somebody said, sir, translation is available. I said, no, I'm speaking to you in English so that you get it right. And he said that the radicalization problem in Europe is going to increase. And it is going to increase because of your political correctness and because you think you know the Middle East better than us. Now, I take this as a very, very pregnant statement. Why? When he says that you think you understand Middle East better than us, then if you look at the way the mosques and the seminaries are supervised in the Middle East, and the way they are not supervised in even hotbeds like Kashmir in India, I think this is a very stark comparison.
Absolutely, and I would just add a line here that there's no doubt that it's happened in Jammu and Kashmir, in Kashmir Valley, where, to my count, about 1,100 mosques. I say even more, perhaps 1,100 mosques changed hands from local Kashmiri priests or members of the clergy to people coming out from all parts of India, who no one had any idea of who they were and what they were preaching, because it was supposed to be religion is always considered to be a very private thing in India. But how it is related to national security, that occurred to us very, very late.
So you think that it is high time that at least in these hotbeds of militancy, we need to supervise the mosques and seminaries very closely, because most of the seeding of terrorism is done in these places. Would you agree to that statement?
I think, Sanjay, that it is already happening. And at least I can tell you one thing, that when I was the commander in Kashmir, even at the lower ranks, I ensured in my areas, all these were under surveillance. And I got the reports everywhere. I visited them, many of them myself. I made efforts to actually bring them on board, many of them. You'd be surprised the kind of measures we took. We had madrasas coming and participating in Republic Day functions, where they were all saluting the national flag and they were singing the national anthem and they were taking part in the march past, and they were thrilled. All the children were thrilled. I ensured that they all took part in district hockey and football and volleyball competitions by coaching their teams with the army's help. All this made a huge difference. Most people don't realize that if you have a network of these kind of systems going on at the same time, it can put an end to this in a couple of years.
Very well. And what happens is that the political leadership that we have had in Jammu and Kashmir, mostly from Kashmir, starting from Sheikh Abdullah, who was once described as a communalist in Kashmir, a communist in Jammu, and a nationalist in Delhi. And he played his, what should one say, a very deceptive role during that period, blackmailed the entire Indian leadership, got this 370 thing, and not just got the 370 thing, also got those presidential orders. And even when I think it was Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq in 1965, when the 1965 presidential order came, he did suggest that now that we are doing away with this Sadr Riyasat and we are doing away with the Prime Minister, the nomenclature Prime Minister, they made that little amendment in Article.
Yeah, following out of the Article 370.
Yes, 367. It was done through 367. And it was later on upheld by the Supreme Court. And that is the route that was, again,
adopted,
used to nullify the Article 370. I've come out with a book. I will present it to you, in which I've analyzed all these legal aspects as well.
I always love to receive your books.
Yes, I will have it sent. So what happens is that the entire political leadership has been in bed with these radicals, and every time any effort has been made to take out these hotbeds, these seeding grounds from the throw of militancy, these political leaders have come and sent it right back. And we can see that right through. I mean, starting from Sheikh Abdullah to Bakhsh Ghulam Muhammad to Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq to Sheikh Abdullah again, even the brief stint of Gulshah, even that was great in radicalizing. In fact, probably it is said that the first concerted attempt in emptying out the valley was made during the time of Gulshah. So the political leadership with which I suspect, or as it is being rumored, the government of India is trying to play ball again, has probably been the principal defaulter in this entire game. And my proposition to you is that they cannot be trusted. So if they cannot be trusted, what other options do you have?
Sanjay, a very good question. Let me respond to that. I would say a democratic system. How do you create a responsible democratic system? Now, if you have democracy, if you restore democracy in Kashmir, like it happened in 1996 after 7 years of militancy, terrorism, etc., obviously everyone is going to go for votes. They are looking for their votes. You can't blame a politician for looking for his votes. How he looks for his vote is not laid down anywhere. There are no rules of the game as such. I mean, there are a broad understanding, but we know the kind of things which can happen in a democratic system. And therefore, obviously, there are pockets of influence here and there, and those pockets of influence are nurtured. Those pockets of influence are also exploited by extraneous elements, and that is how these linkages all develop. I would say that in a area in which terrorism has been prevalent for so long, actually democracy really doesn't promote a countering of the terrorism as such. It actually promotes them in many ways. I would always like to debate this issue because a lot of people told me that the introduction of democracy in 1996 actually countered terrorism. I would beg to differ with that. It didn't really do that because all kinds of different forces start emerging because of that, and they get legitimacy because of it. So a great amount of legitimacy is added to radical elements and all because of the existing democratic systems, and many of them are elected by itself. So now we are struggling with this situation post Article 378 today, this situation in Jammu and Kashmir, to create a new polity. It's going to be a major struggle. There's no doubt about it. How to create a new polity, and the options before the government of India at the moment, the current political system in India, the parties in India, is very, very limited. There are the same old elements, and they have to be very careful about it. I don't foresee that this issue is going to be resolved so easily in binaries, and the new polity of Kashmir is going to become a absolutely lustrous, pure, honest polity completely. No, it's not going to happen. And that is why I tell people have patience, because politics is a game which will continue like this. And there are extraneous powers looking to step in and create problems for you. This is where the scope exists. This is where they will step in and try and extract their pound of flesh from people. And therefore, I think it's a long haul ahead. I cannot foresee immediate answers. But obviously, the government of India has to play ball. And democracy is our chosen way of functioning. That's a part of our constitution. You can't go do without it. But choosing partners in Kashmir today and then playing up to them and then making governments tomorrow is all fraught with danger. And this is something that the government of India has to be aware of.
So my final question, with this background that we have discussed, should government of India be in a hurry to make Jammu and Kashmir a full-fledged state?
See, when the Home Minister announced this in the Parliament, almost in the same breath, he also said that, the state can be restored. Once again, the old state can be restored. It's not written in, or it's not cast in cement that Jammu and Kashmir has to remain a union territory. So I do think at some stage it will happen. What has happened is that actually it has hit the psyche of the people very badly. To be considered from a state down to a union territory, the political status having come down, that is about all. Otherwise, it really is not making a difference. If you ask me, actually, on the development side, from the oversight, a union territory is far better managed. And in terms of corruption and things like, who knows it better than a bureaucrat like you? Then obviously, the oversight from the center is going to be much more. The accountability is going to be much higher. I'm not sure whether the people of Jammu and Kashmir will start demanding for a state once they realize that the benefits of being a union territory are as good and they are getting as much. Only the empowerment of the assembly and things like that. You'll have to have a stronger assembly. If you have a status of a full state, budgetary powers and things like that, those will automatically go up. So I don't think we should be in a hurry at all at the moment. Let the benefits of being a union territory, which are definitely of their own, they need to travel down to the people, travel down to the state, to the current union territory. Thereafter, when everything is stabilized and no danger exists, no danger to national security exists, that is the time perhaps a restoration could be always considered.
Thank you very much, General Hasnain. It was a delight to be with you as always. And you were very, very forthright and very, very clear in your answers, as always. Needless to say that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.